It has been said that the original Alien, directed by Ridley Scott, was one of the greatest sci-fi movies and also one of the greatest horror movies ever made. And it's also been said that the sequel Aliens, directed by James Cameron, is one of the greatest sequels ever made.
It's settled in.
But we've had some sequels that try to bring that magic back, whether behind the scenes they were either sabotaged by the studios. We've had other sequels and mashups that have been very schlocky. Even director Ridley Scott came back to make some prequels, maybe set things right with the franchise, and maybe answer some questions. But even sometimes great directors can...
Shit the bed!
So now we have Alien Romulus, another attempt to try to get the series back on course. But is it any good? Or should we just call this movie Alien Malgarum, because if you're a diehard fan, you might get your heart ripped out. Alright, so let's talk about Alien Romulus. In the Alien timeline, Romulus takes place in between Alien and Aliens. We follow a group of very young characters as they travel into space and they find an abandoned spaceship and decide to go rummaging through it. Alien Romulus is directed by Fede Alvarez, who did the first Evil Dead remake and probably my favorite remake out of the Evil Dead series. The story for this movie is very thin. You could kind of think about it like a slasher film. Teens either steal or borrow their parents' car and decide to go on a joyride. And while they're on this joyride, they meet the villain and then they get killed off one by one. And yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. But man, this movie visually is amazing. It is beautifully shot. We get to see what a functional colony looks like. We get to see a lot of people on this planet. We get to see the dark and grim life of this planet. The look of the ships, the way the computer rooms look are very retro looking, like how they were in the original first two films. It's great to see them using model miniatures again and also using a lot of great practical effects. The movie really does go back to basics, especially with a lot of shots making the corridors of the spaceship very claustrophobic looking. We got a lot of face huggers in this movie, and they were definitely a bigger part of the movie. We also got xenomorphs looking amazing, and we went back to the basics of a man being in a suit. And this movie really did feel like it was taking it back to basics and making it feel more like a sci-fi horror film. Visually, director Fede Alvarez paid a lot of attention to detail in those first two films. That being said, it kind of felt like the director was watching those first two movies on mute.
In your race for power and glory, you forgot one small detail.
The characters! Part of what made those first two films iconic and beloved is because we had likable characters in the films. We got to know these characters, we got to like these characters, which made the movie more intense because you didn't want to see these people die. The first film felt like you were watching everyday blue-collar people working in space. We got to hang out with these people, we got to see their everyday life working on the ship, and that, well, they felt like real people. We had the Marines in the sequel that we got to know and like, even though some of them were kind of jerky, a lot of them were very funny and likable characters. We had this mother-daughter relationship with Newt in the film, and Newt herself as a character went from being a feral little girl into like a real person as the movie went along. Romulus, I couldn't tell you who anybody was except for one character, and that was the character of Andy, played by David Jonsson. And he steals the movie. He's the only character in this movie that feels like a real character and that actually has some character development. I couldn't tell you who any of these people were because no one really stood out. They were just kind of there. This was the only way I could describe each of these characters. Buzzcut girl, pregnant girl, annoying guy that I couldn't understand.
Of course, I'm crooked. I don't want to my old mate Jim to spit down Whitechapel. What?
Daddy's speaking English.
Yeah, I know.
Love interest, dude, and final girl. Our final girl is played by Cailee Spaeny, who does a fine job. Her acting is not a problem at all. It's just more like her character just felt like she was there, and she was only the final girl because the script said so. Even with those issues that I had early on with the film, I was still willing to give the movie a pass because visually it was so good. The movie was entertaining so far. It was kind of doing its own thing. It wasn't relying on too many callbacks, but there was a moment in the movie where I felt like I heard the director say, "Gotcha." Early on in the film, the callbacks and the fan service is kind of subtle, but at some point during the film, they start shooting you with them left and right.
You want you too? Oh, you want someone else?
And like I said, the movie at first is kind of doing its own thing, but it's also borrowing from other sequels. And before we even get to the halfway point, the movie does turn into The Force Awakens.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
There is a callback in the movie, and you'll definitely know the scene when you see it because it's very visually awkward. If you're a fan of the first film especially, and you see this callback, you're going to be like, well, I already know what's going to be happening because it's not out of character. And I think the only surprise you're going to get out of this entire scene is that the movie looks so good up until this point. And pretty much from that moment on, the movie's borrowing from the greatest hits, and not to mention they're borrowing from the bad ones too. Not to mention they're borrowing lines and shots from sequels that haven't even happened yet in the timeline. And Ridley Scott was a producer on this film, so I'm sure he probably made them implement things from Prometheus in there too. There's a really cool thing that they introduced here that had to do with gravity and the alien blood, and I was like, this would have been a lot more intense if I would have cared for the characters. And this scene was supposed to be really, really intense, and I wanted it to be very intense because it's a very cool idea, but it just seemed like a minor inconvenience for these characters, which was very surprising considering what Fede Alvarez did to the final girl Mia in the Evil Dead movie. As far as final girls in the Alien franchise, so our final girl here, Rain got off really easy. I mean, Ripley got tossed around and put through the ringer, not to mention Vasquez. And even though I thought Prometheus was just okay, I thought Naomi Rapace was awesome, and man, she got put through the ringer bad. And then we have the ending.
Pick one.
And just like the movie Trap, this movie has a few endings, and a couple of them feel like they were forced in there. Like I said earlier, even with the flaws that the movie had early on, I was really on its side for the most part. The movie did introduce some cool little ideas, but then it would stop for fan service, and I was like, hey, keep going. I've seen 2 amazing Alien films. I've seen one that was just okay, but had way better character development than this film, and a bunch of not so great Alien movies. I didn't love this movie, I didn't hate it, but I'll probably just forget about it. This is a very tough one to rate because visually I would say go see this on the big screen, and like I said, David Jonsson does steal the movie. But yeah, this is definitely the Alien version of Force Awakens or Frozen Empire. So for visuals and David Jonsson's performance, I would say go see this matinee and just turn your brain off. Alright, so that is my review of Alien Romulus. Hopefully I wasn't too harsh, but I really wanted to be honest about this movie and really wanted to go in depth as far as what I did not like and what I did like about this movie. I wasn't asking for another Alien movie, nor did I want to see another one, but this movie did get me to believe that, hey, maybe a good Alien movie can be done again. Visually and tonally, I think we are on the right track to getting one, but at the same time, story-wise, I don't think we are yet. But hey, did you see the new Alien Romulus movie? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you feel the same way that I did? Or were you so visually amused that you didn't care about all the flaws that it had? So please comment below and let me know, and please don't forget to hit like and subscribe. I'm Mike the Movie Misfit, and I'll see you at the movies.
Oh, no. Not again.
Get more out of life. Go out to a movie.